In 2002, a DVD appeared in Swedish motorcycle shops with no studio, no distributor, and no name on the cover. Just a rider in black and 2 words, GhostRider. Within months, it had sold hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide. Within a year, bootleg copies were circulating on every continent. The man behind the helmet had no publicist, no budget, and no license plate. Just a turbocharged Suzuki, a mounted camera, and the kind of skill that makes your brain argue with your eyes. Nobody caught him. Nobody ever will. And the story of how it all started is wilder than the rides themselves. Number 1. The man behind the black helmet. GhostRider motorcycle legend Patrick Furstenhoff. The man who built one of the most recognizable personas in motorcycle history without ever officially admitting he was the one wearing the helmet. Born in Sweden in 1968, Furstenhoff wasn't a YouTube stuntman chasing views. He was a professional racer, a skilled mechanic, and a man who had already set a Guinness World Record before most people had ever heard the name GhostRider. In April 1999, 3 years before the first film, he piloted a turbocharged Honda CBR 1100XX Super Blackbird to 307.86 kilometers per hour on one wheel at Bruntingthorpe Proving Ground in England. 191 miles per hour on the back wheel. Verified, documented, still standing in the Guinness records today. That's who was behind the helmet, not a kid with a death wish, a professional with 40 years of seat time and the mechanical knowledge to build the machines he rode. Here's the truth. The genius of the GhostRider persona wasn't the speed, it was the anonymity. Black leathers, black helmet, black visor, no license plate, no face, just a silhouette doing things that didn't look physically possible and disappearing before anyone could ask questions. Swedish law required authorities to catch the offender in the act to prosecute. No face, no plate, no conviction. Furstenhoff understood that before he ever mounted a camera to a fuel tank. The Swedish Wheelie team had been pushing machines to their limits since the late 1990s. Furstenhoff was their best, not the loudest, not the most reckless, the most precise. There's a difference, and that difference is why he's still alive to talk about it while others aren't. The real identity of GhostRider wasn't a secret, it was a legal technicality. Motorcycle News ran his full name. His social media eventually confirmed it. The Swedish authorities knew. Everyone knew. They just couldn't do a thing about it. That's not luck. That's architecture. He didn't stumble into the legend. He engineered it. Number 2. Sweden's 90s street scene. Built a monster. Sweden's underground motorcycle street racing scene in the 1990s. The cultural pressure cooker that made GhostRider not just possible, but inevitable. Most people picture Sweden and think clean streets, sensible cars, and law-abiding citizens who recycle religiously. That's the postcard. The reality, at least in Stockholm in the 1990s, was something considerably different. The city had a hardcore underground of riders and drivers who treated the highway system as a proving ground, not weekend warriors. Serious people with serious machines and a serious disregard for posted limits. The culture was built on skill, not ego. You earned your place in it, or you didn't last. Into this world came a video called Getaway in Stockholm, a car-based chase film that went viral before viral was even a word. It claimed to show real police pursuits through the Swedish capital. It spread through the community like wildfire. Riders watched it, talked about it, passed it around. Furstenhoff watched it too. Here's the kicker. He wasn't impressed. In his own words, later confirmed in a Slits magazine interview, he called it out directly. The policeman was a bodybuilder with baggy pants. The roads were empty. The chases were staged. It wasn't real. That reaction tells you everything about who Furstenhoff was. Most people watch something impressive and feel inspired. He watched something fraudulent and felt insulted. Swedish street racing culture in the 1990s didn't just produce GhostRider, it handed him a reason. Getaway in Stockholm was the gauntlet. The GhostRider films were the response, not a tribute, a correction. He didn't set out to become a legend. He set out to show a city full of serious riders what real actually looked like. The roads were there. The machines were there. The skill was already built. All it needed was someone angry enough to point a camera at it. That someone had been in the making for 30 years. Number 3. The Swedish Wheelie crew that forged him. The Swedish Wheelie team, the elite riding group that turned Patrick Fürstenhoff from a talented mechanic into the most technically complete street rider on the planet. You don't develop the kind of skill GhostRider displayed on those Stockholm highways by riding on weekends. You develop it by surrounding yourself with people who are better than you, pushing machines past their limits in controlled environments, and treating motorcycle technique the way a surgeon treats a scalpel, with precision, repetition, and zero tolerance for sloppiness. That's what the Swedish Wheelie team was. Founded in the late 1990s, the SWT was not a casual riding club. These were professional stunt riders, mechanics who understood their machines down to the molecular level, riders who could hold a wheelie at speeds most people couldn't manage on 2 wheels. They competed internationally, set records, and pushed the boundaries of what a motorcycle could be made to do in skilled hands. Fürstenhoff joined in 1999. The same year, he set his first Guinness World Record. That's not coincidence. That's environment-producing outcome. Here's the ugly part. Most people skip over when they talk about GhostRider. The runs look insane because they were insane, but they weren't random. Every machine was built and tested by people who understood exactly what they were doing. Every run was executed by a rider who had logged thousands of hours developing the reflexes those situations demanded. Swedish Wheelie team training forged the technical foundation that made the GhostRider films possible. Without it, the first Uppsala run ends in a crash, not a legend. One of their own, Joachim Karlsson, known as Iceman, died at the Isle of Man TT in May 2005, not on a public road, not evading police. On a closed circuit, doing what riders do. The road collects eventually, from everyone. Fürstenhoff knew that. He rode anyway. That's not recklessness. That's a choice made with full information. Number 4. One camera, one Suzuki, one film that lit the fuse. 2002, GhostRider. The Final Ride 2002, the independently produced motorcycle film that launched a global cult following from a single highway run through rush hour traffic. Summer 2002, Stockholm. A stock Suzuki GSXR 1000 with a basic Sony camera zip-tied to the fuel tank. No crew, no budget, no safety net. One rider in black with a plan that was equal parts brilliant and completely insane. The E4 motorway connects Stockholm to Uppsala, 68 kilometers of Swedish highway. Normal drivers cover it in roughly 45 minutes. Fürstenhoff covered it in 14 minutes and 55 seconds. Average speed, 273 kilometers per hour through rush hour traffic, with cars swerving, trucks drifting lanes, and a camera capturing every near miss in unblinking point-of-view detail. He called it GhostRider, the final ride. The name implied it would be his only film. He was wrong about that, right about everything else. Here's the truth. Nobody had seen anything like it. Not because fast riding was new, because the perspective was new. You weren't watching someone go fast. You were sitting on the tank watching the world compress at 170 miles per hour, with nothing between you and the windshield of the truck that just changed lanes. It was visceral in a way no motorcycle film had ever managed before. The footage spread immediately, hand to hand, DVD to DVD, then online when the internet caught up to the content. The Uppsala run didn't just launch the GhostRider franchise. It invented the template for every POV motorcycle video that came after it. Every helmet camera, every onboard run, every first-person riding video on YouTube today traces its DNA back to that Sony camera on that fuel tank on that summer morning, 2002. One run, 14 minutes and 55 seconds. The fuse was lit, and nobody, not the police, not the courts, not common sense, could put it out. Number 5. The machines that made the myth. GSXR 1000 to 499 horsepower turbo Hayabusa GhostRider motorcycle builds. The engineering behind the machines that made the runs possible, and the specifications that still read like fiction 20 years later. 2 bikes, 2 completely different purposes. both built to a standard that separated Furstenhoff from every other street racer who ever pointed a camera at a highway. For the street runs, the traffic weaving, the police chases, the urban chaos, the weapon of choice was the Suzuki G SXR 1000, light, precise, narrow enough to split lanes at speeds that shouldn't be survivable. Later versions carried a turbocharger pushing over 280 horsepower. These weren't showroom bikes dressed up for YouTube. They were surgical instruments, built to vanish, but for pure speed, for the records, for the runs that defied belief even on closed roads. That required something else entirely. The Suzuki Hayabusa, first generation. Built by Swedish tuner MC Express, the first version produced 417 brake horsepower. Furstenhoff looked at that number and wanted more. Here's the kicker. The second build was a Street Fighter conversion running 1.2 bar of boost on 98 octane pump fuel. It developed 499 horsepower at the crank, 439 horsepower at the rear wheel. When asked if they'd pushed it further, Furstenhoff answered without blinking, "We've had it up to 500, but at that figure, the cooling can't cope." Read that again. The limiting factor wasn't the engine, it was the cooling system. The specification list reads like a fantasy parts catalog. J-turbo pistons, Yoshimura cams, 8 fuel injectors, Öhlins suspension front and rear, 6-piston ISR brakes, PVM wheels. The GhostRider Hayabusa turbo build wasn't a motorcycle. It was a missile with handlebars built by a mechanic who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly how far he could push it. Most bikes are built to a budget. This one was built to a limit. The limit was physics, not horsepower. Number 6. The POV setup that invented a genre. GhostRider POV motorcycle camera setup, the low-budget filming technique that accidentally created the template every action sports video channel on the internet still uses today. Start with what it wasn't. It wasn't a production crew. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't a Hollywood budget with camera cars and follow vehicles and a director calling shots from a monitor. It was a Sony camera, bolted to a fuel tank, pointed forward, rolling. That's it. The simplicity was the genius, because when you mount a camera at handlebar height and point it down a Swedish motorway at 270 kilometers per hour, you don't need cinematography. The road does the work. The compression of distance, the closing speed of traffic, the peripheral blur of lane markings, all of it combines into something the human eye doesn't normally process, something that makes the brain simultaneously want to look away and lean closer. Additional cameras were mounted at different angles across the films, rear-facing, side-mounted chase vehicle footage from crew positioned on highway overpasses. But the fuel tank shot was always the signature, the one that put you on the bike whether you wanted to be there or not. Here's the ugly part. Nobody in the content creation industry wants to admit GoPro built a billion-dollar company on a concept that a Swedish mechanic proved worked in 2002 with consumer-grade equipment and zip ties. The GhostRider first-person motorcycle filming format predated the action camera industry by nearly a decade, and every rider who's ever strapped a camera to their helmet owes something to that original Uppsala run footage. YouTube didn't exist when the first film dropped. By the time it did, the format was already proven. The platform just gave it scale. One camera, one angle, one idea. 20 years later, the whole internet is still copying it. Number 7. Why the police never caught him, and how Swedish law made it impossible. GhostRider police chases Sweden, the legal loophole that turned every pursuit into a guaranteed escape and made the Swedish authorities look like they were chasing a ghost by design. The chases were real, documented on camera. Multiple police cars, vans, helicopters, all of it captured from the same fuel tank mount that filmed everything else. One pursuit involved 6 police cars, 2 vans, and a helicopter, all outrun, all on film. The footage exists, the offenses exist, the convictions do not. Here's why. Swedish traffic law at the time required authorities to apprehend the offender in the act to secure a prosecution, not identify them later, not match them to video evidence, catch them in the moment. On the road, no license plate, no face, black leathers, black helmet, black visor, a silhouette traveling at speeds the pursuit vehicles couldn't match. By the time a roadblock was organized, he was already gone. By the time the footage was reviewed, there was nothing actionable in it. Furstenhoff didn't stumble onto this loophole. He understood it before he started filming. The anonymity wasn't vanity. It was a legal strategy. Here's the kicker. The most insane chase in the entire series wasn't on a motorcycle at all. In Back to Basics, he led multiple police vehicles through Stockholm in a 350-horsepower Subaru Impreza STI. Police attempted to ram him. Patrol cars crashed during the pursuit. Officers came head-on trying to force a stop. He drove away. Swedish motorcycle outlaw legal immunity wasn't accidental. It was engineered by a man who understood the law better than the officers trying to enforce it against him. Hundreds of documented offenses, 0 convictions. The mask worked because the system required them to pull it off in real time. They never got close enough. Number 8. The films that turned chaos into legend. GhostRider motorcycle film series. 6 independently produced DVDs that built a global underground franchise without a studio, a distributor, or a single frame of legal footage. 6 films, no studio, no distributor, no marketing budget beyond word of mouth, and a community of riders who understood immediately what they were looking at, each one escalating the scope, the speed, and the audacity of what came before. The final ride launched it in 2002, Stockholm to Uppsala. The run that started everything. Goes Wild followed in 2003. More intense chases through Stockholm. More documented insanity. The format proven and the audience already hungry for more. Goes Crazy in Europe in 2004 was the expansion. The footage crossed borders for the first time. Paris, the Netherlands, Germany. The Peripherique run in Paris. 9 minutes and 57 seconds around the French capital's notorious ring road was a deliberate tribute to Le Prince Noir, the legendary French street racer who ran the same circuit in 11 minutes and 4 seconds back in 1989. Furstenhoff didn't just match the legend, he erased it by 2 minutes. Goes Undercover in 2005 introduced the turbocharged GSX-R 1000 K5, pushing over 280 horsepower. Back to Basics arrived in 2008 after significant delays. A damaged master tape, reported reshoots in Spain, and a world that had changed considerably since the first film dropped. Here's the ugly part. Piracy nearly killed the franchise. Bootleg copies circulated faster than legitimate sales could keep up with. Films that should have generated significant revenue were being copied and distributed freely across the internet before most buyers even knew they existed. The GhostRider DVD series built its legend partly because of piracy, not despite it. Every bootleg copy was free marketing reaching a rider somewhere who would spend the next decade talking about what they saw. GhostRider 6.66 arrived eventually. Documented speeds on public roads reaching 360 kilometers per hour, over 220 miles per hour, in traffic. Number 9. The one-wheel speed record that nobody believed was real. GhostRider Wheelie World Record. The documented, verified, Guinness-certified achievement that silenced every skeptic who thought the street footage was exaggerated or staged. There are 2 records. Most people only know about one. April 1999, Bruntingthorpe Proving Ground, Leicestershire, England, 3 years before the first film, before the Black Helmet, before anyone outside the Swedish motorcycle community had heard the name GhostRider. Furstenhoff piloted a turbocharged Honda CBR 1100XX Super Blackbird to 307.86 kilometers per hour on the rear wheel. 191 miles per hour, one wheel, measured, witnessed, submitted, verified by Guinness. That record still stands today. Then came the Hayabusa in 2006, Elvington Airfield, Yorkshire, the 499 horsepower turbocharged build that MC Express had engineered to the absolute edge of what cooling systems could survive. Furstenhoff took it to 215 miles per hour on one wheel, breaking his own record by 14 miles per hour. A margin that isn't an improvement, it's a statement. Here's the truth. In an interview before the Elvington attempt, he told Motorcycle News exactly what it cost him physically. His neck was in pain for weeks after the previous record. Everything hurt. He was older. He knew it. He went anyway. Faster. The GhostRider Wheelie speed records weren't stunts. They were the verified, documented proof that what appeared impossible in the street footage was being performed by someone operating at the absolute outer limit of human and mechanical capability. Skeptics who claimed the runs were staged, the speeds exaggerated, the footage manipulated. The Guinness records answered all of it without a single word of argument. You can fake a street video. You cannot fake a Guinness World Record. 2 records, same rider, same obsession, different machines. Nobody has touched either of them. The road doesn't lie. Neither does the Guinness Book. Number 10. The identity leak. Everyone believes, but nobody can prove. GhostRider Real Identity. Patrick Furstenhoff. The open secret that the entire motorcycle world accepted as fact while Swedish law rendered it legally meaningless. By 2005, it was barely a secret. Slits magazine ran a piece describing the rider as a foreign stunt rider, approaching 40 years old. Motorcycle News went further, publishing the name Patrick Furstenhoff directly alongside coverage of his World Wheelie speed record. The connection was explicit. The evidence was circumstantial. The legal situation was unchanged. Nobody could prove it in a courtroom. Here's how the identification actually happened. Not through investigation, not through police work, through the Wheelie record. When Furstenhoff broke the World Wheelie speed record at Elvington in 2006, Motorcycle News covered the event using his full name, the riding style, the machines, the Swedish wheelie team connection, the turbocharged Hayabusa. Everything matched. The motorcycle community connected the dots in about 48 hours. Furstenhoff never confirmed it, never denied it either. His social media accounts eventually made the association explicit without ever issuing a formal statement. His Instagram tagline, 4 words that answered every question without answering anything, reads simply, "Only copies have died." Here's the ugly. Swedish law didn't care what Motorcycle News published, didn't care what the internet believed, didn't care what the motorcycle community knew with absolute certainty. Without being caught in the act, without a face on camera, without a license plate, published identity was legally worthless. The real identity of GhostRider was simultaneously the most open secret in motorcycle culture and the most legally untouchable truth in Swedish traffic law history. The authorities knew, the media knew, the fans knew. The law required none of that to matter. He built a persona so legally airtight that knowing his name changed absolutely nothing. That's not a coincidence. That's engineering. Number 11. The death rumors that refused to die, and the one that was real. GhostRider death rumors. The persistent myths that circulated for decades, and the single real tragedy that gave them just enough credibility to keep spreading. The rumors started almost as soon as the films did. Someone always knew someone who knew someone who had heard that GhostRider had finally gone too far, crashed on a highway outside Stockholm, died in a police chase, killed on the Autobahn during a high-speed run that went wrong. The stories spread across forums, across riding groups, across the early internet with the kind of conviction that only completely unverifiable information travels with. Every single one of them was false. But here's where it gets complicated. The Swedish wheelie team wasn't just Furstenhoff. There were others, assistants, camera operators, associated riders who appeared in the films or worked behind the scenes. One of them was Joachim Karlsson, known in the community as Iceman, connected to the SWT and to the GhostRider productions in ways that blurred the lines between who was who to outside observers. Joachim Karlsson died at the Isle of Man TT in May 2005, not on a public road, not evading police, not during an illegal run. on one of the most dangerous closed circuits in the world, doing exactly what riders at the Isle of Man do. The road collected, the way it eventually collects from everyone who pushes hard enough for long enough. Here's the ugly part. His death fed the rumors because people conflated the two men. GhostRider associated, Swedish Wheelie team, died on a motorcycle. The details got compressed and the legend got darker. GhostRider death hoax history is a masterclass in how mythology operates. One real tragedy, filtered through a community that desperately wanted the legend to be immortal, produced a rumor that 20 years of evidence hasn't fully killed. Fürstenhof is alive, approaching 60, still riding. Iceman was real. The loss was real. The rest was story. Number 12. How Bootleg DVDs built a global underground cult. GhostRider Bootleg DVD Underground Distribution, the pre-internet piracy network that turned a Swedish motorcycle film into a worldwide cult phenomenon before YouTube existed. Understand the timeline. The first film dropped in 2002. YouTube launched in 2005. For 3 years, the only way to see GhostRider footage was to get your hands on a physical disc. And the only way most people outside Sweden got their hands on one was through a chain of copying, trading, and passing around. That had nothing to do with legitimate sales. Someone bought a copy in Stockholm, made 10 copies, gave them to riding friends. Those friends made copies, sent them to riders in Germany, in the UK, in Australia, in the United States. Each copy slightly degraded from the last. Each one watched in someone's garage or living room by a group of riders who had never seen anything remotely like it. That's how cults are built, not through marketing, through scarcity and word of mouth, and the particular electricity of showing someone something they cannot believe is real. Here's the truth. The piracy nearly bankrupted the legitimate operation. Films that should have generated serious revenue were being distributed freely across every continent. Fürstenhof has spoken about the financial damage directly. The irony is total. The bootlegs that cost him money were simultaneously building the audience that made the legitimate releases viable. Every copy disc was a recruiter. Every recruiter brought in 3 more riders who eventually bought something official. The GhostRider global cult following was built on bootleg DVDs, the same way punk rock was built on cassette tapes. The format that was supposed to kill it became the engine that spread it. By the time YouTube gave everyone instant access, the legend was already 20 years old in riding culture. The platform didn't create the audience. It just finally gave the audience somewhere to point everyone else. Number 13. How the law boxed itself out. Swedish traffic law motorcycle prosecution, the legal framework that made GhostRider untouchable, and the authorities who spent a decade trying to prosecute a case the system wouldn't allow them to win. Most countries operate on a simple principle. Commit a crime on camera, get identified, get prosecuted. The evidence speaks. The courts decide. Case closed. Sweden didn't work that way. Not for traffic violations. Not then. The requirement was physical apprehension in the act, not identification, not video evidence, not witness testimony after the fact. You had to catch the offender on the road in the moment, committing the offense. Everything else, regardless of how clear, how documented, how undeniable, was legally insufficient. Fürstenhof understood this before frame 1 of the first film was ever shot. The entire operational structure of the GhostRider films was built around it. No license plate eliminated the most basic identification tool. Full face coverage eliminated visual identification. Speed eliminated physical apprehension. 3 problems, 3 solutions, applied simultaneously, every single run. Here's the kicker. As his identity became publicly known, as Motorcycle News published his name, as his social media made the connection explicit, as the entire motorcycle world accepted the open secret as established fact, the legal situation remained completely unchanged. Knowing who he was and being able to prosecute who he was were 2 entirely different things under Swedish law. The authorities tried roadblocks, helicopters, multi-vehicle pursuits, head-on interception attempts documented on his own camera. an officer physically attempting to pull him off a motorcycle mid-wheelie. All of it failed, all of it captured, all of it filed away without producing a single conviction. The GhostRider legal immunity wasn't a flaw in the Swedish justice system. It was the system working exactly as designed, applied by someone who had read the fine print more carefully than the people paid to enforce it. Hundreds of offenses, 0 convictions. The law boxed itself out. He just made sure he was standing outside the box when it happened. Number 14. He gave away the 499 horsepower Hayabusa and then came back anyway. GhostRider Hayabusa giveaway and comeback. The moment everyone thought the legend was over, and the rider who proved them wrong 20 years later on the same road. In 2012, without announcement, without ceremony, without the kind of retirement statement that legends usually issue when they're stepping back, Forstenhoff put the 499 horsepower turbocharged Hayabusa into a website lottery, the machine that had defined the most extreme chapters of the GhostRider story. The bike that held a Guinness World Record, gone to a random fan. Just like that, the motorcycle community interpreted it the only way it could. It was over. The death rumors intensified. Forum threads declared the end of an era. Riders who had grown up watching the films wrote eulogies for a legend they assumed had finally decided the odds had run long enough. He had young sons. He had said publicly he wanted to stop. The Hayabusa going to a stranger felt like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. Here's the truth. It wasn't punctuation. It was a comma. October 2022, 20 years after the original Uppsala run. Forstenhoff returned to the E4 motorway. Same road, same black gear, same commitment, different decade. He filmed Uppsala Run 2022 in 4K, the same 68 kilometers, the same Stockholm to Uppsala corridor, still averaging over 250 kilometers per hour. Not as fast as 2002, he was pushing 60. The traffic was heavier, the stakes were different. He went anyway. GhostRiders 2022. Comeback wasn't a victory lap. It was a statement that the legend doesn't retire on anyone else's timeline. The man who built the myth by refusing to be caught spent 20 years proving he couldn't be stopped either. He gave away the missile, kept the obsession. Some riders age out, some just get quieter about it. Forstenhoff got a 4K camera. Number 15, what GhostRider left behind and why nobody's replaced him. GhostRider motorcycle cultural legacy, permanent mark left on riding culture, online video, and the mythology of the outlaw rider by one Swedish mechanic with a camera and a turbocharged Suzuki. 20 years of internet, millions of motorcycle channels, GoPros on every helmet, drones above every canyon run, algorithms serving riding content to anyone who watched a single video. The infrastructure for creating the next GhostRider has never been more accessible. Nobody has replaced him, not even close. Here's why. It wasn't the speed. Speed is replicable. Machines are faster now. Roads haven't changed. Someone with the right bike and the wrong judgment can hit 300 kilometers per hour on a public highway today. People do. Most of them don't survive long enough to build a following. It wasn't the camera work. Every rider has a camera now. The footage exists in quantities that would have seemed impossible in 2002. None of it carries the same weight. It was the combination. Professional skill built over decades, mechanical knowledge deep enough to engineer the machines personally, legal understanding precise enough to operate in the gap between what was documented and what was prosecutable. A persona constructed with enough deliberate ambiguity to become mythological, and the discipline to execute all of it consistently across a decade of films without one mistake that ended everything. Here's the ugly part. The riders who try to replicate it without that foundation don't become legends. They become statistics. The road doesn't grade on intention. GhostRider's motorcycle legacy isn't really about speed or stunts or outlaw culture. It's about what happens when genuine mastery meets genuine obsession, and the result gets documented before the world had a framework to contain it. He arrived before the algorithm, before the influencer, before the content strategy. Just a rider, a camera, a highway, and the kind of skill that makes your brain argue with your eyes. Nobody's replaced him because nobody's built what he built to do it with. The roads still have their ghosts. This one just never got caught. GhostRider, motorcycle legend. One man, one camera, one decade of footage that rewrote what riding culture thought was possible. No studio, no license plate, no conviction. Just skill built over a lifetime and the discipline to never make the mistake that ended it. He's still out there, still riding, still unnamed in every courtroom that ever tried. Subscribe to Old Man's Ride. New videos every week on the riders, the machines, and the stories the mainstream never tells right. The legend doesn't retire, neither does this channel.